Hello, this is Anguna Chakraborty from the Department of Mass Communication and Journalism, Siliguri College. We are happy to announce the beginning of a video series called Our Media Discourse, where we will discuss the current trends and practices in the media today and the challenges of life in a mediated world. We hope you like the videos. Your comments are welcome. Today, in this first episode, Dr. Mounir will discuss a critical media theory with our 4th SEM students. Thank you.
Hello, welcome to the first episode of our Media Discourse series being presented by the Department of Mass Communication and Journalism of Siliguri College. In this series, we shall be looking at some of the issues and trends of media today, and in the process also initiate our students into the ways and means of media production and make our teaching learning process more student oriented. Today we'll be discussing one of the most debated theories, media theories, which is basically a media effect theory. Media effect theories basically focus on the effect of media on the audience. And we look at some of the early theories, and the theory that we will be discussing today is the theory of narcotizing dysfunction, which takes a very critical view of the mass media. This was put forward way back in 1948 by Paul Lazarsfeld and Robert K. Merton. And the trend, as was the trend in those days, the effect theories, as far as media was concerned, were quite critical of mass media. In this discussion today, we have with us on my right, Titisha Shah, and on my left, Sharnop Sanyal. Both of them are very bright students of 4th SEM, and as we begin our discussion, we'll be looking forward to what Titisha and Sharnop has to say with regard to this theory of narcotizing dysfunction. Yeah. To begin, I'd like to ask Sharnop. Sharnop, the main focus of this theory, the premise is the assumption that media sort of narcotizes rather than energizes. Means heavy consumption of media actually leads people to a position of inaction rather than action. What would you say to this?
To talk about the narcotizing dysfunction theory, I would like to cite this German literary excerpt from the poem of The Frog in the Well. The frog in the well is someone that has bounds of wells surrounding it. It doesn't know the world that exists beyond. And that's where it gets desensitized. It gets tired of the well. It gets tired of everything around it. And then that tiredness, that lethargy, it becomes normalized. And that's where I would like to draw in, like how narcotizing dysfunction theory works. It comprises apathy to its extreme limits, apathy towards issues, apathy towards activist issues, apathy towards issues that have encompassed us throughout ages. And still, we have done nothing about it. We have done nothing but just gape at them with our eyes open. And that's what I believe. That's how narcotics work in general. It desensitizes us. And that's what narcotic dysfunction does. Constant influx of media that we have been consuming. We have been desensitized. We don't know what's going around us. Even though we know, we don't take no steps towards it.
Yeah. So the basic point which we're trying to make is the issue of, apathy. Okay, so there is this superficiality which cloaks mass apathy. These are the lines of Lazarsfeld and Merton. Now, you see, a very key word of this theory is the term anesthetic. What media does is when someone goes for a surgery, for instance, the surgeons, the doctors, the medical team, first thing they do is to sort of anesthetize the patient so that he is relieved or from the pain of the surgery. Now, drawing a parallel, Lazarsfeld and Merton, they say that the media does the same thing what the anesthetist do to the patient. The early days of television, when you look back at television in India, especially in a town like Siliguri, we started watching television from 1985. In the early days of television, we would be exposed to all the bad things that were going on in the world on television. And we all know the news shows what is wrong. That's the very nature and character of news. And though people would be, horrified, they would be, very shocked at whatever negativity that the news would, portray. But what happens is when people watch the negativity day after day, there is this process of getting used to it. This is basically what Lagersfeld and Merton terms, the anesthetic effect. When people don't react, the nerves lose their spring, their bite. Instead of being energized into action to address the issues and problems of society, they become alienated from it. In this regard, I'd like to go to Titisha. How do you agree with these assumptions?
So I would say that as students of media, we take a lot of pride in the fact that media has such effects on the environment, where it brings about change, enlightens its people. But one of the major aspects that gets ignored is the aspects of this theory. For example, the way that we have been so desensitized to violence and war and bloodshed that happens all around. We wake up in the morning, we read news, and we have our morning tea with that. And that's just the way it is, and that's just the way that we have started to live. Because we have been completely desensitized. We have this false sense of accomplishment where we think that just by reading or just by agreeing to the views or disagreeing to them, we are bringing about a change. But in reality, it does not really make a difference. One can agree or disagree to certain things behind the screen or form an opinion, but change only comes when we take actual actions towards it. And narcotic dysfunction, I think, talks about that, slacktivism, as we read about. It's just that false sense of accomplishment that we get from just participating from a distance. Sitting behind the screen only can do so much, and I think we forget that.
And this is something which even Lagersfeld and Merton, they stated that people congratulate themselves on being enlightened and informed. So they confuse information with action. Okay, a rather extreme view in my opinion, because there have been, remember this theory was put forward in 1948. And as the years roll along, and more and more people became accustomed to mass communication as a part of their lives. And in fact, today we live in a mediated society. We look at the world, with every aspect of the world, through an agency. And that agency is the media.
What I feel is, in this late capitalistic world that we are moving to, what art and what art forms essentially encompass, essentially contain, is the art of creation. Protests, wars all over the society, protests that were written in form of them, in response to them. They were written in forms of poems, they were written in forms of stories. Those are acts of creations. We don't do that anymore. We don't really indulge in creation anymore. We don't go out of our way to spend our energy on something rather than just consuming, than just getting the little gratification that we get from other people, whatever they feed to us. We don't really produce anything. That's where I feel where it really strikes an imbalance. The idea of apathy only occurs is when we become consumerists, when we only take in and we don't give anything back to the world. As cited, it's very one-sided in general, the idea of media. And whatever we have done is just influencing the things, influencing the topics that have been fed, very eloquent ideas, but we haven't done anything with these ideas. These ideas are just being stored in us. We aren't doing anything to produce. Therefore, I feel like nowadays we should create. We should indulge in creation. We should indulge in community. We need to connect with people. We need to create. We need to create communities. That's what we need to do.
Yeah, I agree. But, there will be people, who would disagree with us, especially when you look at how the social media apps like Facebook have been very effectively used to, sort of galvanize people, into protest. If you look at the CAA movement in New Delhi or other, the farmers' protests, the social media has a lot to do to connect with people, So there'll always be a criticism of the perspective that we are, discussing today. But they have some points. Social media can galvanize people. After all, it's connecting. They connect people. I mean, in the olden days, when someone would like to organize a protest, they would always have people going on, connecting. When even phones were not easily available to middle class people, so there would always be physical movement, or sometimes even put the post to invite people to, arenas of, dissent or protest. But that is something which can be easily, managed today with social media in this digital world. But the point which I'd like to make is how real is. I mean, people get going. They are galvanized into action. They do assemble. But as you said, there are people who will be at a protest site and they'll be still looking at their phone screens. So what is the degree of association with the real world? And that's why many of these programs, these mobilizations, after a certain time, they somehow lose they lose the momentum. And one of the reasons is that somehow the degree of involvement, the degree of participation in the real world perspective was perhaps marginalized. Okay. Yes. So, what would you say to that, Titisha?
Speaking about the balance between creation and consumption, I think in the present time, creation is something that is so accessible to everyone. Back in the day, it wasn't. I can pick up a phone and make a video of video where I give my opinions and easily post it on any social media platform. Like Sir said, the age of user-generated content. Back in the day, it wasn't that accessible. I believe the problem is passive activity. I mean, it's quite an oxymoronish term, I believe, but that false sense of activity, like I talked about, where one is believing that they are playing a part. But rather it's not really bringing about a change, and it's just that false sense of accomplishment they get from it. Yes, I feel that there is, back in the day, I feel like there was a community of creators and a community of consumers. Painters would paint, their paintings are in the gallery and the viewers would go and watch, and there was a clear distinction between the two. In the present day scenario, that distinction has sort of blurred. It's something, I think, like with social media, like Sir said, it's bringing people together. It's that feeling of community, too, I feel like, is passive. The people that talk to each other on social media, I don't think that they bring about that same momentum, that same gravitas that once the actual physical protests bring. So that's my viewpoint on it.
Yeah, that's a thing. That's a very important point which you make, is this delusion, the delusion of connectivity that social media brings in. When you do something very creative and you get 5,000 likes, and you sort of, lull yourself into believing that I have really done something which is making a tangible effect on the world. But then beyond the likes, there's virtually nothing. There would be millions who wouldn't be aware. Even if someone had content which was viewed by 10,000 people. Now, in this big jungle of the digital jungle, there would be millions who wouldn't be aware of what you have done. No. In the 40s, 50s, 60s, these critical media theories, they had a point, because in those days, media did have a very strong, and if I may say so, one-sided effect on people, which is quite different from today, because today, as Titisha said, the creator, the consumer is also the creator. And this has lots of, complexities, complex implications, which is beyond the scope of today's discussion, especially the very ethical premise of handing the stage or the mic to any Tom, Dick and Harry. I mean, this is a very big question. Okay, so as we go along with with our discussion today, we'll be taking in a few questions right now from Titisha, Shonlop, and some of our other students, and that will be the next phase of this discussion.
Greetings to everyone present in the room. My name is Prasid Chetri, and I'm from 4th Sem, Siliguri College. So I listened to your conversation, and I must say it was very informative. All of you had quite an interesting time to give, and the topics that were shared were definitely informative, and I learned a lot, but I must say that I have a lot of questions and queries that need to be answered. So first of all, I would like to ask you, sir, our head, what do you suggest that we should do in order to battle media's addictive content, right? Sir, we've learned in the hyperbolic bullet theory, right? We are sitting ducks. Media just projects their agendas over to us, and we just listen. And pretty much that was what this narcotic dysfunction theory talked about, right, sir? So that's that. And it's pretty obvious that we cannot entirely just stop this all at once, right, sir? But what do you think that, what necessary steps do you think that should be taken in order to, battle this rising problem of misinformation and everything else that's down the line, sir?
Yeah, this is a very difficult question. I mean, there was a time when, say, the days of cinema, when television was yet to be, 24-hour television had not yet come. Now, you had to buy a ticket, go to the cinema hall and watch a movie. So it needed some effort, physical effort on your part. So that was a time when there were people who would watch cinema, there were people who wouldn't. And it was easier for the people who decided not to watch films to not watch films. Now, when that content comes to your bedroom or your study, and more so after the smartphone, the content is traveling with you. The content platform is traveling with you. Now, it takes a lot of self-control to not be allured, to put on the screen, to turn your face to the screen, That's why there's a lot of anger at that phone screen, because it grabs most of your time. And when you look back to what exactly you have done the entire day, you see most of your time on the screen has been spent on matters which are trite, which are of no consequence, right? So it's a difficult question. How do you control? One is when you talk about regulation. One is the collective level. There the state, the government rules very little. You can't expect the government to control your lives. That's where it is important for you, especially those of us who are studying mass comm and are more aware of what the mass media and digital media can do to you. It's up to us to take a determined decision after all the insight into media effect. So we have to take a determined decision as to exactly how much content you're going to consume and how are you going to allot your time during the day to your physical activities, your real world, and as well as to your phone.
Considering how much information we see and possibly indulge and consume over our media platforms, right? Do you think that media should be regulated at this point of time? And if so, how do you regulate the media without breaking any of the freedom of speech boundaries that have been given to us by our constitution?
think the easiest way to combat that would be to connect with the physical world, sometimes shut down and take a step back, and to indulge in the real world a lot more than you do with the intangible. To choose a paperback over a PDF, and just take a part in community life, to make a contribution that is significant to the world.
Yeah, media regulation is always a very dicey, affair to start with. There is already some regulation in place. Especially if you look at the print media, we have laws, especially defamation, and already the Constitution of India has certain reasonable restrictions on press freedom, which are deemed, there is a there was a very strong feeling from those who framed our Constitution that unlike the United States, the freedom of expression cannot be absolute. So while the Article 19.1, it states clearly about the freedom of speech and expression as a fundamental right, there is also Article 19.2, which lays down the reasonable restrictions on press freedom. And so some degree of regulation is already there, but the question assumes more, significance when you look at how the digital media runs, is how it functions, because sometimes technology is too quick for policymakers to follow, and you result in policy vacuums. Especially, let me cite an example. When the audiovisual media, the private television channels started, especially the 24-hour news channels, starting with Aaj Tak and NDTV, that was a very strange, situation where on one hand you saw these channels functioning, and on the other hand they were not legal as per the Indian Telegraph Act of 1855, because there was no, registering authority, no licensing authority for private 24 hours news channels. So on one hand they were not legal, on the other hand you had ministers from government attending to the the talk shows and the discussions on those television channels. This is because technology is going at a faster pace than policy formulation. So this is a issue which the digital media, especially when governing or regulating the digital media, is concerned. And whenever there is talk of some regulation, there is always very strong reaction, because there is always this impending fear that the regulation might be a cloak for actually subjugation, for media censorship. So this is a very complex question. I think it all boils down to individual, self-regulation or, self-control as far as media consumption is concerned.
I would like to extend to what Sir said. I feel like freedom of speech laws have already existed in terms of regulation. In fact, I feel like all of them have already been written. Now, the thing is that we have to reinforce them. We have to reinforce these laws that have always been existing. We have to, like, for example, there has been like lots of laws enacted against like hate speeches or stereotypes or very like racist undertones, but people still exercise them, people still do them. These things they have already existed in laws. The one thing that's required though is the idea to reinforce them, to reinstate them, and that people should actually follow the laws that have already been written down. I don't think there's any need of starting anything from scratch and changing all of the laws from its core. I feel like there should be a little bit of reinforcement to them. That's what I believe.
Well, Sanok, this question is for you. While I was listening to you, you just mentioned that capitalism exempts people from communication. I'd like to understand your point in that regard. Like, how does it exempt people from this thing, right? From communicating? Because, I might be misinformed, but what I assume capitalism is to be is like, well, of course, capitalistic society, right? Everybody has to work for their bread. They have to earn their bread. But however, since it's like a free economy, right? aren't people bound to speak to each other, right? Aren't people bound to communicate in order to earn their bread, in order to learn, in order to grow, right? Because that's what capitalism is about, right? In communism, of course, it's a whole different ideology and a conversation.
I'd like to take you through the trenches of how paradoxical the entire idea of the free market is. How it started out as is the idea that everything is unregulated. You could do whatever you want. It's a market that's available to all. But what it actually had an establishment in mind is something very resembling of an oligarchic society. Oligarchy is the idea that everything, every very important thing, very important political decisions or companies are governed by like a group of people, a group of certain people. Now, we have no idea to discern who these people are. Whoever wins the rat race, they get on top. So that's what I believe that privatization led to. What you're talking about capitalization or capitalism or privatization in general, what it has done is it has alienated us. What capitalism does and what makes it very terrifying, as if the free hand is a leviathan creature, is what capitalism does is it subsumes everything, even critiques of itself. What it does is it sells even your own individualism to you, covered in very lush and grandiose attempts. That's what it does. It doesn't give you any free attempts. It doesn't give you that's just an illusion. It's an illusion of a free market. But what it does is it alienates you from people around you. It tells you, it places very much value on like hard work. It places very much value on the amount of work that you do, how you have to win against others. It puts you out there. And whatever thing about individualism, whatever thing about free expression that you said, whatever it enforces, capitalism does that. It does that and it presents it to you in very gold-plated ideologies that you believe and you consume. But at the end of it, you're being fooled. You're just being led to a very narrowed narrative. That's what I believe. I feel like capitalism in general is subsumption.
This was the end of our first episode of our Media Discourse, and I'd like to thank Titisha and Shornup for their participation, as well as to our students who have joined in this session. And we look forward to more such insightful and brainstorming sessions. The idea is to share whatever we have come to learn and to believe with the world at large, and we stand to be corrected. So if there's any feedback and you'd like to say a word on whatever has been discussed today, all you have to do is to put in a comment, and we'll be looking forward to your feedback. Till the next episode with another interesting topic, it's time to say goodbye and hope you enjoyed our episode. Thank you.